The day everything was taken. My name is Elena Carter, and I was 19 years old when my parents decided I no longer deserved a future they had already taken from me. Didn't happen with shouting or slammed doors. There was no dramatic fight, no moment I could point to and say, that's when everything broke. It was quieter than that. Colder. It happened at the kitchen table. I still remember the way the sunlight came through the window that morning, soft and warm, landing on the polished wood like nothing was about to change. My mother sat across from me, fingers wrapped around her coffee mug like it was the only steady thing in the room. My father didn't sit at all. He stood near the counter, arms crossed, already distant. "Elena," my mother said, her voice careful, rehearsed. "We need to talk about your plans." Plans. That word should have meant college, my internship, the small business program I had been accepted into. It should have meant possibility. Instead, it meant an ending. "I already told you," I said, trying to keep my voice even. "I start in the fall. I just need access to the fund Grandpa set up. Tuition's due next month." Silence. Not confusion. Not hesitation. Silence that felt intentional. My father exhaled slowly, like he'd been waiting for this exact moment. "That fund isn't available anymore." First, I thought I misunderstood him. "What do you mean?" I asked. "It's been used," he said simply. Used. The word didn't make sense in my head. It didn't fit. That money wasn't just savings. It was my grandfather's promise. Cool shares for me and my younger brother Mason. Education. A start. Something solid. For what? I asked, my voice sharper now. My mother looked down at her coffee. There were investments. Expenses. We made a decision as a family. A family? I repeated, my chest tightening. I wasn't part of that decision. My father finally looked at me then, his expression flat. You didn't need to be. Something in me shifted. Slowly. Quietly. Dangerously. And Mason's share? I asked. Intact, he said without hesitation. He still needs it. Course he did. Mason, the golden child. The one with potential. The one worth protecting. I felt something crack inside me, not loud, not dramatic, just a clean, silent break. So you took mine, I said. My mother winced slightly, like the truth sounded worse out loud. We didn't take it, Elena. We reallocated it. Reallocated. Like my future was just a line item on a spreadsheet. I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. I got into that program on my own. I worked for that. And you should be proud, my father said. But it's time you start taking responsibility for yourself. I stared at him. I'm 19, I said quietly. You're an adult, he replied. The world doesn't hand things to you. No. Apparently, it just takes them away. I looked between them, searching for something, regret, hesitation, anything that suggested this wasn't permanent. I found nothing. Only certainty. You're really doing this, I said. My mother finally met my eyes, and for a second something flickered there. Not guilt. Not quite. Fear. But it wasn't fear for me. We've done enough, she said softly. That was it. No apology. No compromise. No plan for how I was supposed to move forward without the one thing that had been promised to me my entire life. Just done. I stood up slowly, the chair scraping lightly against the floor. The sound felt louder than it should have, like it marked something final. Okay, I said. My voice didn't shake. That surprised me. Okay, I repeated, more to myself than to them. 'Cause in that moment, something settled inside me with a clarity I couldn't explain yet. They hadn't just taken my money. They had taken my starting point. And they expected me to fail without it. They were wrong. I didn't know how yet. But I was going to build something anyway. Something they could never take from me again. Learning how to survive without a safety net. I didn't go back to my room after that conversation. I walked out of the house instead. No suitcase. No plan. Just my phone, my wallet, and the kind of silence that settles in when something irreversible has already happened. By the time the sun set, I still hadn't heard from them. No message. No call. No, come back so we can figure this out. That was when it became real. They weren't going to fix it. They weren't even going to acknowledge it. So I stopped waiting. The first night, I slept on my friend Tasha's couch. I told her it was temporary, just a few days until I sorted things out. She didn't ask too many questions, but I could see it in her eyes. Concern. Confusion. I didn't explain. Because I didn't know how to explain that your own parents could look at your future and decide it was optional. Within a week, I had 2 jobs. Mornings at a small coffee shop downtown, afternoons stocking shelves at a grocery store. It wasn't glamorous, and it definitely wasn't the life I had imagined when I opened that college acceptance letter. But it was movement. And movement meant I wasn't stuck. I learned quickly how expensive survival really was. Rent wasn't just a number, it was pressure. Constant, quiet pressure sitting at the back of your mind. Groceries became calculations. How long could I stretch a loaf of bread? Was it smarter to skip dinner or save that money for gas? I stopped thinking in months. I started thinking in days. Some nights, I would lie awake on Tasha's couch, staring at the ceiling, replaying that conversation over and over again. We've done enough. The words didn't hurt the way I expected them to. They burned slower than that. Like something that stayed. By the 3rd week, I found a tiny studio apartment. If you could even call it that. It was barely bigger than a bedroom, tucked above a laundromat that never seemed to sleep. The walls were thin, the floors uneven, and the heater worked only when it felt like it. But it was mine. Every dollar of it. I remember standing in the middle of that empty space on my first night there, surrounded by nothing but a mattress on the floor and 2 bags of clothes. And for a moment, I almost broke. Not because it was hard, but because it wasn't supposed to be like this. I had done everything right. Good grades. No trouble. No demands. And still, it hadn't been enough. But then something shifted. The same quiet way it had at the kitchen table. I realized I had 2 choices. I could keep asking why. Or I could start asking what now. So I chose what now. I enrolled in community college instead of the business program I had planned. It wasn't the dream, but it was a step. A smaller one. A harder one. But still mine. My schedule became a constant rotation of exhaustion. Work. Class. Study. Repeat. Sleep when I could. When I remembered. There were days I felt like I was running on something thinner than energy, just momentum and stubbornness holding me together. And then there were days when everything caught up. Like the morning I woke up with a fever so high I could barely stand but still went to work because missing a shift meant risking rent. Or the night my card declined at the grocery store, and I had to quietly put things back while the line behind me grew longer. No one stepped in. No one asked if I was okay. And somewhere along the way, I stopped expecting them to. My parents never reached out. Not once. It was like I had disappeared from their world the moment I stopped being convenient. But I didn't disappear. I adapted. I learned how to fix things myself. How to stretch time, money, energy, everything. And slowly, without realizing it, I started building something. Not success. Not yet. But resilience. The kind that doesn't come from comfort. Kind that's forged in quiet moments when no one is watching and giving up would be easier, but you don't. 'Cause there's no one left to catch you if you fall. So you don't fall. You just keep going. Even when it hurts. even when it's unfair. Even when the people who were supposed to protect you are the reason you're here in the first place. I didn't know it then. But those years, those exhausting, lonely, relentless years, they were building something inside me that my parents never could have given me. And one day that would matter more than anything they took. Building something no one could take. By the time I turned 24, exhaustion had become a language I understood fluently. Not the kind you fix with sleep. Kind that settles into your bones and becomes part of how you move, how you think, how you exist. But I was still moving. Still pushing. Still refusing to stop. Community college turned into a transfer. Not to the prestigious business school I had once dreamed of, but to a state university that gave me just enough opportunity to prove something to myself. I didn't have time to feel proud of it. Pride didn't pay rent. I kept both jobs at first, then shifted into something slightly better, an administrative role at a small logistics company. It wasn't glamorous, but it came with a desk, a computer, and something I hadn't had before. Access. I started paying attention. Not just to my tasks, but to everything around me. How orders were tracked. How clients were handled. Where mistakes happened, and more importantly, where money was lost. Patterns started forming in my mind. Small ones at first. Then bigger ones. I noticed how inefficient their systems were, how much time was wasted on manual processes that could easily be automated. I didn't have a title that gave me authority to fix anything. But I had something else. Perspective. So I started learning. Late nights weren't just for studying anymore, they became research sessions. Free online courses. Forums. Trial and error coding experiments that crashed more often than they worked. I wasn't trying to become an expert. I was trying to solve a problem. Months passed before I built something that didn't break immediately. A simple internal tool. Rough. Basic. But functional. Cut down hours of manual work into minutes. I showed it to my supervisor, expecting dismissal. Instead, he stared at it for a long time, then looked at me like he was seeing me for the first time. "Did you make this?" he asked. I nodded. That was the beginning. Not of success, but of recognition. They started giving me more responsibility. Small projects at first, then bigger ones. Eventually, I was no longer just managing tasks, I was improving systems. Fixing things. Optimizing. Creating. For the first time in years, I wasn't just surviving. I was building. By 26, I left that company. Not because I was ready, but because I realized something important. I had been solving problems for someone else's business, and I could do the same for my own. Starting wasn't glamorous. There was no big launch, no announcement, no safety net waiting if it failed. Just a laptop, a small savings account, and an idea built from years of quiet observation. I started offering process optimization services to small businesses. First, no one took me seriously. I didn't have the connections, the background, or the polished story people like to invest in. I had something less visible. Proof. Slowly, one client turned into two. 2 into 5. 5 into more than I could manage alone. I reinvested everything. No shortcuts. No celebrations. Every dollar went back into building something stronger, something scalable. I hired carefully, expanded slowly, and learned constantly. There were setbacks, of course. Clients who backed out. Projects that failed. Nights where I questioned everything. But failure didn't scare me anymore. I had already lived through worse. By 28, my company wasn't small anymore. It wasn't fragile. It wasn't something that could disappear overnight. It had structure. Clients. Revenue. It had weight. The kind of weight that doesn't come from luck. Comes from consistency. From showing up every single day, even when no one is watching, even when no one believes in you. I bought my first house that same year, not because it was a milestone I had always dreamed of, but because it represented something far more important: stability, ownership, control. I stood in the empty living room on the first night, just like I had in that tiny apartment years ago. But this time, the silence felt different. It wasn't heavy. It wasn't uncertain. It was earned. Everything in that space, every wall, every corner, existed because I had built my way there. Not because someone gave it to me. Not because someone believed in me. But because no one did. And I didn't need them to. Or at least, that's what I thought. Until the day my phone rang. And I saw my mother's name on the screen. For the first time in nearly a decade. I let it ring. Once. Twice. 3 times. And then, I answered. Because something told me this wasn't about reconnection. Never was. And I was right. When they came back, not for me. I didn't say hello when I answered the phone. I just listened. For a second, there was nothing on the other end. Just breathing. Controlled. Careful. Then my mother spoke. Elena. The way she said my name felt strange, like she hadn't used it in years and wasn't sure it still belonged to her. I was wondering when you'd call, I replied calmly. A pause. We've been meaning to reach out, she said, her voice slipping into something softer, almost rehearsed. We just didn't know how. I leaned back against the kitchen counter, staring out the window of the house I had built for myself. You found a way, I said. Another pause. This one longer. He's in trouble, she finally said. Not we miss you. Not how have you been. Just, he's in trouble. Of course. Mason? I asked, even though I already knew. Yes. I closed my eyes briefly, not out of emotion, but out of recognition. Some things don't change. What kind of trouble? I asked. My father's voice cut in this time, sharper, more direct. Financial. That word again. Always financial. I almost smiled. How much? I asked. There was hesitation this time. Real hesitation. 75,000, my mother said quietly. The number didn't shock me. What shocked me was how easily they said it, like it was something I could just fix. Like it was still my role to absorb the consequences of decisions I had nothing to do with. What happened? I asked. A business investment, my father replied. It didn't work out. I let the silence stretch. I could picture it without needing more details. Mason chasing something easy. Something fast. Something handed to him without effort, just like everything else had been. And you want me to what? I asked finally. Help him, my mother said quickly. Just until he gets back on his feet. Back on his feet. The phrase echoed in my mind. 'Cause I remembered exactly what it felt like to not have feet to stand on at all. You mean cover it, I said. It's not like that, she replied, a hint of defensiveness creeping into her voice. This is family, Elena. There it was. That word. Family. Sounded different now. Not warm. Not safe. Transactional. Where was family, I asked quietly, when I couldn't afford my tuition? Silence. Where was family when I got sick and couldn't pay for medication? Nothing. My future was taken from me, I continued, my voice steady. And you called it responsibility. That's not fair, my father snapped. We made difficult decisions. So did I replied. Another pause. He shifted tactics. You've done well for yourself, he said. We're proud of you. The words felt hollow. Too late. Too convenient. This isn't about pride, I said. This is about money. It's about helping your brother, my mother insisted. No, I said softly. It's about you expecting me to clean up a mess you helped create. Her tone changed then, sharper, colder. You're being selfish. I almost laughed. The word didn't hurt anymore. It didn't even surprise me. No, I said. I'm being consistent. There was a long silence after that. The kind that used to make me uncomfortable. Not anymore. We thought you'd understand, she said finally. I do understand, I replied. That was the problem. I understood everything now. The favoritism. The choices. Quiet calculations behind every decision they made. And I understood something else too. Nothing had changed. Not really. I wasn't their daughter in that moment. I was a resource. A solution. A backup plan. I'm not sending money, I said. My father exhaled sharply. You can afford it. That's not the point. Then what is? He demanded. I thought about that for a second. About everything I had built. Everything I had survived. Everything they had taken. The point, I said slowly, is that you taught me exactly how this works. Silence. You taught me that when things get difficult, you look out for yourself. That's not what we... That's exactly what you taught me, I cut in, my voice still calm. And I learned it well. My mother's voice dropped, almost a whisper. So that's it? You're just going to turn your back on your family? I looked around my house. At the life I had built. At the peace I had fought for. I'm not turning my back, I said quietly. I'm just not carrying you anymore. And then... I hung up. I stood there for a long time after that, the phone still in my hand. Waiting. Not for them to call back. But for something inside me to react. Anger. Guilt. Regret. Anything. But nothing came. Just clarity. Clean. Sharp. Final. I thought that would be the end of it. I really did. But a week later, I got something in the mail that proved I had underestimated them. Again. The truth they thought I'd never see. The envelope was thick. That was the first thing I noticed. No return address. No name on the front, just mine typed neatly, precisely. The kind of precision that doesn't come from emotion. Comes from intention. I already knew it was from them. I just didn't know how far they were willing to go. I opened it at my kitchen counter, the same place I had taken their call a week earlier. Paper inside was heavy. Legal. I scanned the first page once. Then again. Then a third time, slower. They were suing me. I didn't react right away. No shock. No panic. Just a quiet stillness that settled in my chest like something familiar. They claimed I had agreed, verbally, to financially support Mason in exchange for access to a family trust. A trust that didn't exist. An agreement I never made. A story built entirely out of expectation. I let out a slow breath, folding the papers carefully before setting them down. So this was the next step. Not asking. Not guilt. Control. They couldn't make me say yes, so they tried to force it. I called a lawyer that same afternoon. Her office overlooked the city, glass walls and clean lines, everything structured, everything intentional. She read through the documents once, then leaned back in her chair, studying me. They cut you off at 19? She asked. Yes. No support? No shared finances after that? Nothing. She nodded slowly, tapping the paper with her pen. And now they're claiming you owe them money? I gave a small, humorless smile. Apparently. She didn't smile back. This won't hold up, she said finally. There's no documentation. No legal basis. But that doesn't mean it ends quickly. I know, I said. Because this wasn't about winning. It was about pressure, and they knew exactly how to apply it. Calls started first. Not from them, but from extended family. People I hadn't spoken to in years suddenly had opinions. You should just help him. It's your brother. Money comes and goes, but family is forever. I listened. Then I stopped answering. 'Cause I realized something important. They weren't asking what happened. They were repeating what they had been told. And my parents had always been very good at controlling the narrative. A week later, the story changed. Now I was the ungrateful daughter who had promised to help and then abandoned her family when they needed her most. The irony didn't escape me. But I didn't correct them. Not yet. The first hearing came faster than I expected. Courtroom was colder than I imagined. Not physically, though it was that too, but emotionally. Detached. Clinical. My parents sat across from me, composed, calm, like this was just another step in a process they had already decided the outcome of. My father didn't look at me. My mother did. Steady. Expectant. Like she still believed I would fold. I didn't. When the judge asked for evidence of the agreement, their lawyer hesitated. There were no emails, no contracts, no records of any trust, just words. And under scrutiny, words aren't enough. My lawyer laid everything out clearly. Timelines, financial independence, complete absence of any agreement or obligation. Piece by piece, the story my parents had built started to unravel. By the second hearing, the tone had shifted. What began as confidence turned into something closer to discomfort. And then, it was over. Dismissed. Clean. Final. No case. No foundation. No leverage left. Inside the courtroom, my lawyer asked if I wanted to countersue. For damages, she said. Legal fees. Emotional distress. I considered it. For a moment. Then I shook my head. No. Not because they didn't deserve it, but because I was done giving them access to my life, any part of it. Even through a courtroom. I thought that would finally end it. That they would stop. That they would accept reality. But I underestimated them. Again. 'Cause a few days later I received a message from someone I hadn't heard from in years. My grandfather's former financial advisor. I think you should see something, it read. We met at a small office downtown. He looked older, slower, but his eyes were sharp. Focused. He didn't waste time. Do you remember the education fund your grandfather set up? He asked. Yes, I said carefully. I managed it, he replied. Until he passed. Something in my chest tightened. There were strict terms, he continued. Equal distribution. No withdrawals without approval. I nodded slowly. That's what I was told. He slid a folder across the desk. Inside were copies of statements, transfer records, official documents, proof. I opened it slowly, scanning the pages. And then I saw it. A transfer. My name. My portion. Moved. 3 months before I turned 19. No authorization. No emergency. No explanation. They told me it was gone, I said quietly. That it had been used for family expenses. He met my eyes. That's not what happened. The room felt smaller suddenly. Quieter. He transferred it, the advisor said. Your father. Into a private account. I didn't react. Not outwardly. But inside. Something shifted. Not anger. Not even hurt. Clarity. Cold. Precise. Unavoidable. They hadn't just taken my future in a moment of pressure. They had planned it. Timed it. Executed it before I even had the chance to ask questions. And then, They had blamed me for struggling without it. I closed the folder slowly, my hands steady. 'Cause the truth doesn't explode. It settles. And this one settled into something final. I had spent years thinking I survived something unfair. But this wasn't unfair. This was intentional. And for the first time, I wasn't just moving forward. I was seeing everything exactly as it was. And I knew with absolute certainty, this wasn't over. Not yet. The empire they couldn't touch. I didn't go home right away after that meeting. I sat in my car, the folder resting on the passenger seat, my hands still on the steering wheel like I had forgotten how to move. The city outside kept going. People walking. Cars passing. Lives unfolding. Normal. But something inside me had shifted permanently. Not loudly. Not violently. Just completely. For years, I had carried a version of the story that made survival feel like strength. Like I had endured something unfortunate. Something unfair. But now, I understood the truth. They didn't just leave me without support. They removed the foundation I was supposed to stand on, and then watched to see if I would fall. And when I didn't, they came back not to fix it but to take more. I picked up the folder again, flipping through the pages slowly. Every number. Every signature. Every decision they made without me. It was all there. Documented. Proven. My lawyer called later that evening. "Elena," she said carefully, "this changes things. I know. This isn't just unethical. Could be criminal. Misuse of funds. Fraud, possibly." I leaned back against the seat, staring up at the roof of my car. "I'm not filing anything," I said. A pause. "You're sure?" she asked. "I'm sure." Because this wasn't about revenge. And it wasn't about dragging them into another courtroom. I had already won the only battle that mattered. I had built a life they couldn't control. But there was one thing left to do. Not for them. For me. For years I had stayed quiet, letting their version of events exist unchecked, letting people assume what they wanted, 'cause I thought silence meant peace. I was wrong. Silence didn't protect me. Protected them. So I went home, opened my laptop, and started writing. Not emotionally. Not impulsively. Just truthfully. I wrote about being 19 and losing everything overnight. About the fun that was supposed to give me a future, and how it disappeared before I could even touch it. About working 2 jobs. About getting sick and having no one to call. About building something from nothing while carrying the weight of a story that wasn't mine. And then I wrote about the lawsuit. About how they tried to force me back into a role I had already refused. I didn't exaggerate. I didn't accuse. I just laid out the facts. Clear. Direct. Unavoidable. And I ended it simply. I'm not sharing this for sympathy. I'm sharing it because silence allows things like this to continue. And I won't be part of that anymore. I didn't post it publicly. I didn't make it a spectacle. I sent it privately. One message at a time. To the people who had believed their version of me. The responses didn't come all at once. They came slowly. Carefully. Some didn't respond at all. Some did. I didn't know. We only heard their side. That changes things. It didn't fix anything. But it didn't need to. Because this wasn't about fixing the past. It was about correcting the truth. A week later, my mother sent a letter. Not a message. A letter. 7 pages. Carefully written. Measured. There was no direct apology. But there was something close. She wrote about fear. About not understanding me. About making decisions she thought were necessary. She admitted they used the money. Admitted they hid it. admitted they didn't think I would recover the way I did. The last line read, "If you ever want to come back, the door is open." I read it once, then folded it, set it aside, 'cause I realized something in that moment. I didn't need their door anymore. I had already built my own. Years ago. Piece by piece. Late nights. Early mornings. Quiet sacrifices no one saw. I built a company that now supported dozens of employees. A business that didn't just survive, it scaled, expanded, thrived. What started as one service had grown into a full systems consultancy working with companies across states. Revenue wasn't a struggle anymore. Stability wasn't a question. And for the first time in my life, security wasn't tied to anyone else's decisions. I stood in my living room that night, looking around at everything I had created. Not inherited. Not gifted. Built. And I understood something clearly. They thought taking my starting point would break me. But all it did was force me to build something stronger. Something they couldn't access. Couldn't manipulate. Couldn't take back. People still ask me sometimes if I'll ever reconnect with them. If I'll forgive. If I'll go back. I don't answer right away. 'Cause forgiveness isn't a single moment. And going back, that's not even a question anymore. I don't need closure from people who rewrote my beginning. I created my own ending. And now, when I sit at my table, every seat is filled with people who chose me. People I chose back. There are no conditions. No expectations hidden behind kindness. Just presence. Just truth. They once told me that family helps family. What they meant was, you help us. What I learned was something entirely different. Family isn't where you prove your worth. It's where you never have to. And I don't need to prove anything anymore. Not to them. Not to anyone. Because the girl they thought would fall built an empire instead.